All right, with that, then with time limitations, let's get this thing on the road. We'll get it going. Call this meeting to order. If everybody could join me for the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Let's start with a roll call.
Yeah,
Chair Mashburn,
I'm here.
Vice Chair Winternet,
Yes.
Supervisor Hume. Sorry.
Here.
There you go. Supervisor Burgess.
I am here.
Okay. Supervisor Ding.
Here.
Again.
Supervisor
Here.
Provenza is absent. Department of Finance will not be participating today. Board Member Martin.
Here.
Board Member Udang. Is that? Board Member Matsumoto.
Here.
And do we have any ex officio members? Assemblyman Grayson? And liaison advisors today from Fish and Wildlife? Heather Sweeney. I noticed that we have Suisun Resource Conservation District. I also noticed that we had YOLO Foundation, March. Do we have any other liaison advisors in online today? Okay. Then we are here. We do have a quorum of 6 plus 1 extra voting member.
All right, that brings us to public comment. So do we have any members of the public here who wish to address this board on any items that are not on this agenda or within the? Don't see any. Anybody out? Oh, I see a hand just went up out in internet land.
Oh, I just wanted to quickly, I can't turn my camera on, introduce myself. I'm Sheila Allen. I'm Deputy to Yolo County Supervisor Jim Provenza, who'll be retiring at the end of the year. And I won my election in March, so I'll be the incoming Yolo County District 4 Supervisor, and I look forward to working with you in the future.
Congratulations. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, we
Thank
look
you.
forward to seeing you too.
Okay, thank you.
See no other. So that brings us to item 4, which is board elections, sir.
Great. Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. And it is July. So July is when we do our board elections annually. So first, I want to start by thanking Supervisor Mashburn for serving for 2 years as our chair, and Member Leo Winternitz for serving the last 12 months as our vice chair. It's really, greatly appreciated your service, and you're part of what makes this organization a great organization. So I appreciate your to that. For our standard, Supervisor Mashburn has now served 2 years. And so we will need to elect a new chair, and it has to be a county supervisor. I have reached out to the county supervisors, reached out to Supervisor Hume, and he is interested and willing to serve as the chair. And Member Winternitz has actually served for 12 months. And so he's eligible to serve another 12 months. And I've reached out to Leo, and he is willing to do so. So I think with that, I will simply open it up for.
So that's my motion. Those two go right under the bus.
Second.
Motion in a second. All those in favor, and I believe we have to do a roll call vote. Right, Madam Clerk?
We do. We have to do them. So we have Mashburn as a motion. So sorry. And Martin as a second. Let's vote. Chair Mashburn?
Aye.
Aye.
Wait.
Wait a minute.
I already know how this one's gonna go.
Yeah, there we go.
I'm
Leo.
just saying, yes.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Hume, are you gonna vote?
Yeah.
There we go. Do I have an aye? Supervisor Burgess?
Yes.
Aye. Supervisor Ding?
Enthusiastically, yes.
Yeah.
You're up next. Board Member
Aye.
Martin is aye, and Board Member Matsumoto.
Thank you. Yes.
With 6 ayes, 7 and one aye. It passes, motion passes. And the gavel has been passed. So Supervisor Hume, you will now take over the meeting.
Okay, I wasn't
That
prepared
works
for
too.
that. I apologize for not being here, and I want to thank Don Natoli for continuing to serve. Obviously, he has the continuity. I knew I was well represented, and I figured if I'm going to be elected today, I should show up to the meeting. But I do have conflicts normally on these days with a SAC sewer where I'm currently chair, but I'm phasing out of that role, so I'll be able to pay more attention to the Conservancy. So thank you all for the confidence. All right, with that, we move on to item number 5, the consent calendar. Are there any comments, amendments, or changes? No public comments as well? Okay,
Move approval, sir.
I have a motion from Director Mashburn,
Oh, my God.
second from Director Winston. And we have to have a roll call vote, I believe.
We do. Let's go. Chair Mashburn,
Oh, oh,
Whoops. I'm sorry.
Ex officio chair emeritus.
Supervisor Mashburn,
Aye.
Board Member Winternet,
Yes.
Supervisor Hume.
Aye.
It's not gonna go well, I can already tell. Supervisor Burgess.
Oh, you got it right this time. Thank you, Burgess.
I
Yes.
know, it takes me like one time every
It's
time.
okay. I try to like just sit back.
Supervisor Ding,
Aye.
and Board Member Matsumoto.
I wasn't here. Can I abstain? Or do you not?
You can't.
You actually, well, you have a choice. You can either abstain or you are. I researched this recently. You are actually allowed to vote under the assumption that you reviewed the minutes and understand what happened and were informed by your.
Thank you. That, the vote, passes is 6+1. Motion.
All right, then that brings us on to item number 6, the executive officer's report.
Great. Good morning again. I'm going to try to make this quick. There's a lot in the report, so please feel free to ask questions. Yes. Just want to note that because we're doing the site visit, we want to try to get out there before the heat of the day. We will not have our
Too late.
This morning. We will not have our standard updates from Stewardship Council, DPC, special programs, DWR. They will resume in October. So I'm going to start the report with a staffing update. I want to recognize Rachel Lane at the far end of the table there. Rachel was our drought program analyst who has done an amazing job working on the drip program, which you'll hear a lot about today. But we recently were able to bring Rachel on as a permanent environmental scientist. So she's done such a great job. It's really wonderful to be able to welcome her here permanently. Thank you, Rachel. On a slightly sadder note, Larry Hughes, a retired annuitant who's been with us for 5 years, actually retired for, I think, the 3rd or 4th time. Larry was he was fantastic. He was behind the scenes. He helped us so much for so long. So we're really going to miss him. But it's also noted that he was actually one of the COVID trackers early on. So we lost it for a couple of years during COVID, and that's just a great way to prevent service. All right, so again, I'm going to zip through this, so stop me if you've got questions. Delta Drought Response Pilot Program, I'm not going to go into any detail at all. We've got an agenda item later to cover the full report. I want to talk a little bit about our fiscal year 2020-25 budget, 24-25 budget. We're pleased to report that all of our baseline funding is intact. We did, as expected, lose the $6 million in wildfire prevention funding, but we were anticipating that happening. We've heard that there's a potential for an across-the-board cut, relatively small cut to next year's budget, but we don't have a lot of information on that. And then if you're tracking or if you've seen the bond, climate bond, there is $29 million identified for the Delta Conservancy. So that's kind of a brief update on the budget. We have returned to work officially. As of July 1, we are reporting to the office 2 days a week. We're here Tuesdays and Wednesdays. So if you ever want to see us in person, those are the days that we'll be here. For the administration's request, we're all here 2 days a week. We think that's a good mix. It gets us good face time, but we also are quite capable of working remote. So it's a nice balance. There's quite a few administrative updates. I'm not going to go into those in any great detail. They're there for your review. Did want to mention that the request for proposal on Frank's Tract is still in negotiation. There were some last minute contract issues. We're requiring additional authorities, potentially working with Department of Fish and Wildlife to see if we can get that moving forward. We had that here listed that we were going to start in early summer of this year. That was a holdover. Moving now for fall this year. So I want to talk a little bit about a number of grant applications that we've put in recently. But first, just preface that with we're sort of moving into what we're calling Delta Conservancy light phase. So, over the last 9 years, the Conservancy has made about $130 million available to locally supported projects. But unfortunately, most of those funding sources have now tapered off. So we're kind of returning to our roots, where we functioned a little bit more like a nonprofit conservancy, going after multiple grants, trying to bring money in to support our efforts until potentially a bond passes or other funding sources become available. So just wanted to mention a few. We have applied for the Resource Conservation Service, RCPP, Regional Conservation Partnership Program, requesting the full amount, $25 million. And that will continue our work for nature-based solutions, doing subsidence and rice conversion in the Delta. We should hear back from NRCS by the end of the year, whether or not we receive that. We also applied for a National Fish and Wildlife Foundation America the Beautiful grant. That was $5 million, and that's to support 2 projects that the Conservancy paid for planning, but we don't have the funding to help with implementation. So that funding would help support those 2 projects. We're applying for 2 separate grants from the Delta Science Program for 2 different projects. One's to better understand pathways to rice cultivation in the Delta. The other is to look more at polluticulture, which is wet agriculture in the Delta. That's in total $500,000. Those proposals are due on August 29th. And then lastly, we have applied for the Clean Vessel Act program from California Department of Parks, Division of Boating and Waterways. So that would be the Conservancy taking on that program. And that's about a $280,000 a year grant. We have an action item on that later to talk to the board about that, so I won't go into detail there. So those are the main ways that we're trying to bring in additional funding. If successful, that would bring an additional $30.75 million to the Conservancy and keep us well funded into the near future. I want to take a second and thank staff for all of their effort in getting those proposals out. These proposals are big, they're unwieldy, and it's a tremendous amount of work. And staff has done really a fantastic job of stepping up and getting in proposals, which I think are very, very likely to be successful. Nutria eradication, I don't have the latest update about what's going on in the Delta, but the latest numbers are. Moving on to Delta Science, just a couple quick notes. There are updates on the restoration subcommittee, and they're moving forward. The Delta Interagency Invasive Species Coordination Team, they are working to get a presentation in the Suisun Marsh about invasive species. So we're working on that aspect of that. Wanted to mention that the last time we met, we had posters set up in here that were going to be presented at the State of the Estuary, but the State of the Estuary was canceled at the last minute. So it was rescheduled, and it did go forward on the 28th of May, and staff went down and presented those posters. The posters are listed there to see them and look at them at the last board meeting in March. Let's see, moving on. The 2024 Bay Delta Science Conference is scheduled for October 2024, and there's a list of multiple posters and sessions that we have submitted that have been accepted. So we'll have a very large presence at the Bay Delta Science Conference again this year. There's a list of Conservancy staff participating in several science and community outreach efforts. Just more opportunities for staff to be out in the community, engaging with partners. Several listed there. I won't go into them in detail. We're wrapping it up here. So we're getting on to, there's 3 media mentions. Was one, the Bay City News talked about Pittsburgh and the waterfront improvement project that we funded. Press covered East Contra Costa County plans to the restoration of Knightson, which we funded planning for. It's moving to implementation. Quite a bit of press on that lately. And then the Asian American News published a piece on Jean Yakatobi, who is the lead for the Delta funded, or the Conservancy funded Asian American Heritage Park. That was quick. Any questions on that part?
Where is the October conference?
It will be here in town.
Okay.
Yeah, it's typically at the convention center.
Just note in your report, you should rephrase return to work as return to office because it's not like you stopped.
Good point. Good point. Yeah. Don't leave out the impression we're only working 2 days a week. All right, thank you for that.
It is RTO, right?
Okay, let's see. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jessica to give us a budget update.
Yeah, I'm Jessica Adel, I'm the administration supervisor here. Good morning, and the board liaison today. Just briefly, as Campbell said, the 24-25 budget is out. We got our usual appropriations, general fund appropriation. We get a small appropriation from the environmental license plate fund also that covers some of our facilities costs. And we also get an annual appropriation for our bond funding for Prop 1 and Prop 68 and for that support. And we received pretty much what we have this year is the same as what we'll have next year for those. We do have appropriations that are local assistance from previous years from 21 and 22 that we are still using. Those have a longer term for our use. And so those will be used through 26 through the end of 27. And the grants are all appropriated now, but the support portion of that will be using through 27 and likely longer than that as the grants are administered. So we are in good shape for the current year as far as meeting our needs. The report that we have for agenda item 6.2 is our report from July through April 30th of this year. Our fiscal analyst is also our board. We're not able to get them all reconciled for the meeting. Our June reports also did just come in, but again, not time to reconcile them by the time the board docs were due for the meeting. Our salaries are in line. We are at, the 10/12 in terms of salaries. We made a little change on the report. We sort of did some more subtotaling on it so that the bottom portion of the report, let me just start at the top. So if you look at line 4, we have our total personal services, which is our salaries, which is most of our budget. If you skip on down to line 18, there's some operating and expenditure subtotaling. And if you look at the far right, where we do the percent of the budget expended, it's only 30%. And we are like 10/12, or we are 10/12 through the year. And I laugh, this often happens at the end of the year because we get a lot of expenses that are budgeted that don't get expended. We don't get invoiced until May or June. Okay. So everything that we have budgeted will be expensed by the end of the year. We have a couple large invoices that we did receive in May and June that will kick that budget over to a more reasonable figure. So by the end of June, we'll have expended our budget. We did at the very bottom, if you look at line 24, we put more of our local assistance funding down there. Basically, we are budgeted for those amounts. And you'll see those large appropriations that we have just encumbered this year, but haven't expended many of them, like the nature-based solutions, all of those grants have been just encumbered this year. So those expenditures will start next year. So we'll start representing those at the end of the year. Did anyone have a question? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Concludes the executive officer's report. Thank you.
Very good. All right, on to item number 7, the Ecosystem Restoration and Climate Adaptation Grant Program Update.
Good morning. My name is Angie Shadya. I'm an environmental scientist here at the Conservancy. Today, I'll be presenting agenda item 7, the Ecosystem Restoration and Climate Adaptation, or ERICA Grant Program Update. That can be found starting on page 18 of your board packet. On the bottom of the page here, you'll see a breakdown of the funding sources that make up the ERICA Grant Program, along with their funding availability. These include Proposition 1, Climate Access and Restoration, listed here as CARD, Nature-Based Solutions, Wetland Restoration, also known as NBS. These grant programs have only a small amount of funding remaining for amendments and as-needed changes. So the ERICA program now has 19 active projects. The detailed updates for each of those can be found starting on page 19. We're happy to announce that all 4 of our nature-based solutions funding program of those projects have executed grant agreements and they're now active. So to provide a highlight there, the Delta Rice Conversion Program run by the Nature Conservancy. They've received proposals from interested farmers and will begin conducting site visits of the applicants' sites. So selected farmers will enter into contract and begin conversion later this year. And then for nature-based solutions, continuing with that, in the next agenda item, Lauren will be providing a more detailed update on the rice conversion and wetland restoration on Webb Tract projects. And then in addition, the Prop 1 funded Lower San Joaquin River Riparian Corridor Restoration Planning Project has requested an amendment to their project budget, scope, and term, and that was approved earlier on today's consent. So the ERICA program has a total of 20 closed grants now. On page 35 is a project summary and photos for the Elk Slough Fish Passage and Flood Improvement Planning Project. Under this grant, Reclamation District 999 and their project partners prepared a design plan that would accommodate fish passage and ensure improved flood protection for Elk Slough and the surrounding region. So the proposed enhancements included in that design plan expect to protect agricultural lands adjacent to the slough from flooding, improve habitat conditions for listed species, and improve water quality within the slough. So now that their grant term has ended, the project team will continue to pursue additional CEQA compliance and apply for implementation. Full reports for any of our closed projects can be requested at the contact information at the top of page 37. And that's all I've got for you today. So thanks, and I'd be happy to take any questions or comments.
Any questions or comments? No, thank you. Any public comment on item 7? All right, moving on to item number 8, please. Rice conversion and wetland restoration on Webb Tract projects update.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Lauren Damon. I'm the Ecosystem Restoration and Climate Adaptation Project Supervisor. I'm presenting agenda item 8.1, which starts on page 39. This is an informational update regarding the rice and wetland projects on Webb Tract. Given the size and scope of these projects and the ongoing authority of this board to consider implementation funding, this update is being provided ahead of future considerations and action. Planning for both the rice and wetland projects on Webb Tract has begun. Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, which I'll refer to here on out as MET, in consultation with the Delta Conservancy, prepared a 3.5-minute video regarding the projects that I'd like to play for you all. This video was also aired at their first public outreach meeting on July 10th. Both of those recordings are available on their website, and the links are both in the stack. There is sound, so those of you online, if you can't hear it, let us know.
Unplug it real quick. Okay, plug it in again.
Okay. I'll turn my sound on.
Webb Tract has been farmed for decades in the Sacramento Delta region. As they plant row crops, the soil, the rich peat soil, it oxidizes over time. And over the decades, we've lost elevation, and that causes subsidence on the Delta Islands. We were awarded a $20.9 million grant from the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta Conservancy to build 2 separate projects on Webb Tract. For the rice project, our objective is to create sustainable agriculture on the island, something that is profitable and will help to maintain the island, but will also make it so that we don't erode the soils any farther. So it will wet the soils and allow us to be able to create a sustainable product that we can sell on the market. The second is to build up to 3,500 acres of wetland on the island. The wetland will hopefully, with the biomass that's created through the cattails and for the tules that are going to grow, they'll eventually lay down over time and will help us to not just stop subsidence, but reverse it, which is how these Delta Islands were formed in the first place. In addition, we're hoping to create habitat, which will support some of the migratory birds in the Delta region, some recreational benefits associated with the islands, some educational benefits, and partnering with ecocultural experts in the region to help bring some tribal knowledge to management and maintenance of the islands. The grant was funded under a program called the Nature-Based Solutions Program.
The overall goals of the Nature-Based Solutions Program is really to target the 150,000 acres in the Delta that continues to subside all the time, creating huge carbon emissions and threatening the state's water supply. We hope to accomplish just a great demonstration project that anyone in the Delta can see, a 5,000 acre island that's been put into a mosaic of managed wetland and rice, stops subsidence, stops carbon emissions, but also has enough ag revenue and enough revenue from the carbon market to maintain the levees and keep the island viable into the future.
It's very expensive to keep those levees up, which protect the islands. By doing a sustainable agricultural product like rice on the islands, we're hoping to be able to generate enough revenue that will help to pay for the maintenance costs on the islands and the upkeep of the levees. So some of the research opportunities that we have are to study how we can manage the water across the islands to maximize phytoplankton and zooplankton production, which could be used as fish food that can then be exported off the island to help the local ecosystems. Conditions in the Delta and in California in general have created water supply issues. So if we can study how we can reuse water, how we can manage the water and recirculate it, we can reduce water flow across the island as well. I'd really like to thank the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta Conservancy for providing us this grant opportunity, which will develop these two very important projects for the Delta region. We're really excited about our opportunities to be able to partner with Delta interests, to be able to generate a project that will bring so much new information to the Delta, and that will be able to transfer some of this knowledge to local landowners as well.
I'd like to add appreciation for Metropolitan Water District being really in the forefront of this, willing to take the risks to look at how we manage Delta Islands into the future so that we can maintain them into the future. It's that kind of partnership that's really critical.
If we can show that this is that we can generate revenue enough for us to be able to make this revenue positive, we'll be able to show local landowners that this is possible on their islands as well.
So as stated in the video, our agreement with Met has multiple parts. The first part is the rice conversion project, which is split into two phases, planning and implementation. As part of the planning process, Met has publicly posted a request for proposals and conducted mandatory site visits for all the applicants. The request for proposals seeks to lease 1,361 acres of existing agricultural land on Webb Tract to an experienced farmer that will convert the land to rice-ready condition and grow rice for 5 years. The implementation phase of the rice project will not begin until Met's board takes action to authorize execution of the lease agreement, and this board also takes action to release implementation funding. We anticipate bringing this consideration before you in early 2025. The second part of our agreement with Met is the wetland restoration project, and that's also split into two phases. As part of the planning phase, Met is consulting with design, outreach, and ecocultural experts to create about 3,000 acres of managed wetlands that blends with existing topography, including historic tidal channels and sand dunes. Prior to construction of the wetlands, this board must consider and take action to authorize implementation funding. We anticipate bringing this consideration before you in 2026. The third part of our agreement with Met is included in the implementation phases and is a research component after both projects are constructed. As discussed in the video, these projects will be a demonstration of what we can do with an entire subsided island in the Delta. Completion of projects at this landscape scale will provide insight to many data and information gaps that will inform future nature-based solutions projects. I appreciate everyone's time and attention, and I'm happy to take your questions.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Yes.
Yeah, I have a question. So Met anticipates bringing a request for the rice conversion at January 2025 board meeting. So the funds for that have they already been encumbered?
We have encumbered the funds for the grant.
Grants been
That is
executed,
correct.
so those grants are encumbered.
Yeah, so the award has been given, but the funds have not been distributed there.
Correct. And the way we did the original approval was that they would come back to the board for approval to expend implementation funds after their CEQA was complete. So that's the next step.
Okay, so we have that money, yeah.
The agreement has conditions in it that they have to meet in order to have access to that additional fund.
Right. And you still, the board gets to still take action to approve that.
Right.
Just because it's encumbered doesn't mean they can bill against it.
Right.
until we have-
Director Burgess.
Thank you. I want to say that the public meeting that was done very well. I would encourage you to watch the presentation. Campbell and everyone did a really good job of explaining conditions in the Delta that I don't think everyone really are that a lot of people truly understand. And I think the way they explained it, it was really well done. So I want to give kudos to everyone. The folks at Metropolitan did a great job. And I do want to say that at the very end, she clarified that the approval from the Conservancy did have something that said that this project could not be used for mitigation for any other projects, that this was, a project done on its own. So I just thought they did a great job. Think that our staff here at Conservancy does a great job, and it'll be interesting and to see what happens there at Webb Tract. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I know you were there in person. I watched it via the remote link, and it was a very informative meeting. Very well done, both by Conservancy staff and Met staff. So hopefully the public got a lot out of that. Any other comments or questions? Yeah.
So per our standard, the Delta Conservancy standard, they will maintain the entire island in a wet condition for 15 years.
Okay.
But we allowed them to do the rice lease for 5 so that they could get a private farmer in there to do the lease. But there is a requirement for 15 years.
That was my recollection. We had that conversation years ago about the length term on some of these projects. So, okay. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? All right. Hearing none, we will move on to item number 9, the Community Enhancement Grant Program update.
My name is Maya Garrett, and I'm the Conservancy's Ecological and Community Programs Analyst. I'm here to present agenda item 9, the Community Enhancement Grant Program update, which can be found on page 41 of your agenda packet. The Community Enhancement Program is funded through a $12 million allocation from Proposition 68 and 2 general fund allocations of Climate Access and Resource, or CAR funds, totaling $11.4 million. The program accepts applications on an ongoing basis and is actively seeking proposals. At present, we are aware of several applicants working on their proposals. Currently, there's $3.7 million available in Proposition 68 funding and under $20,000 available in CAR funds. However, we are considering awarding $950,000 in Proposition 68 funds today. We currently have 13 active projects and 1 closed project. The projects are detailed on pages 42 through 47 of your agenda packet. But to provide a highlight, the Freeport Delta Gateway Monuments project has completed design plans and are working on their acquisition and implementation grants. In addition, we have 1 proposal for consideration today, agenda item 10, the Stockton Maritime Museum Planning Project. The Community Enhancement Program has also closed its first project, the land acquisition for the Clarksburg Schoolhouse and Delta Welcome Center. The purpose of the project was to acquire a 1.13 acre parcel to serve as the permanent home of the restored 1883 Clarksburg Schoolhouse. The implementation of the project is underway. The final report for the project is available by request. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to take any comments or questions.
Very succinct presentation.
I should add that the restoration is almost complete. And the schoolhouse is going to be an amazing resource. It's a beautiful facility.
It is beautiful. And as well, the Heritage Park in Ileton is under construction. So I was down there recently and saw that. Any questions or comments?
Field trip.
Field trip. Amen.
It'll be next.
It's not 100%.
Yeah, that's right. Any comments online? Any public comments? All right, in that case, we will move on. Thank you. To item number 10, consideration of award of Community Enhancement Grant Program funds for the Stockton Maritime Museum Planning Project.
Follow-up to the Community Enhancement Grant Program update. I'm pleased to present for board consideration agenda item 10, a recommendation to award Proposition 68 funding for the Stockton Maritime Museum Planning Project to the Stockton Historical Maritime Museum. This item can be found on pages 50 to 53 of your agenda packet. Conservancy staff recommends that the board approve up to $950,000 in grant funding for this proposal. The purpose of this grant is to fund the pre-construction planning activities for construction of the Stockton Maritime Museum. The plans will include 3 structures replicating old shipyard buildings. The 3 structures include a guard shack and maintenance building, a 2-story ship access building to provide ADA access to the museum ship, and the Colberg Boatworks building that will include classrooms and a 2nd-story event center. Once built, the museum facilities will showcase the fully restored USS Lucid, which will be docked adjacent and connected to the museum. The USS Lucid is the last restorable aggressive class ocean-going minesweeper remaining in the world. The goals of Proposition 68 are to fund projects that promote recreation and tourism, historic and cultural preservation, and environmental education. The Stockton Maritime Museum Planning Project meets all of these program objectives. The project is not considered a project under CEQA, but does include required permits for the implementation of the project. It is also located in a severely disadvantaged community and is expected to support the community through increased economic activity and tourism. Lastly, although the Stockton Historical Maritime Museum will not contribute cost share for this portion of the project, they have received support for other phases of the project. The property for the museum has been donated, and they have received significant monetary commitments for the implementation phase of the project. The restoration of the ship has also been completed by volunteers and community contributions. Additionally, they have received support letters from the Department of the Navy, Downtown Stockton Alliance, San Joaquin Community Foundation, San Joaquin Office of Education, and Visit Stockton. Our staff is pleased to recommend this project for board approval. There is suggested motion language at the bottom of the agenda item for your consideration, but before we proceed, I'm happy to take any comments or questions.
Thank you. Any comments or questions?
Quick comment. I Googled the USS Lucid. Fascinating history. I encourage it.
Good. I had a quick question. Is the Colberg Boatworks building, is that on site or is it being rebuilt?
It'll be restored with materials from it. It suffered a fire, I think last year, I want to say. So plans shifted a little bit, but it will be use the original building materials as a rep.
Any other comments or questions? Any comments online?
Okay.
Yep. Any public comments? Okay. Thank you. I believe this is an action item. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to, am I on? Motion to approve.
Do we need to read the language? Okay.
Move the board award funding up to $950,000 to the Stockton Historical Maritime Museum from the Proposition 68 Community and Economic Enhancement Grant Program for the Stockton Maritime Museum Planning Project.
Is that consistent with your motion, Supervisor Ding?
Yes, it is.
Very good. Mr. Mashburn is in second. Roll call vote, please.
Supervisor Mashburn.
Aye.
Board Member Winternitz.
Aye.
Chair Hume.
Aye.
Supervisor Burgess.
Yes.
Jessica, just one pause real quick. Supervisor Burgess, can you just confirm whether there's anybody there with you?
There's only a kitty cat with me.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Should I note that in the notes?
Yes.
I will not.
The kitty
note
cat
the
especially.
Supervisor
And she-
Ding.
And she's over 18.
Does it identify as a cat?
Okay. Supervisor Ding.
Yes.
There we go. Board Member Martin
Yes.
and Board Member Matsumoto.
Yes.
You have 7 ayes. The motion carries.
All right, that brings us on to item number 11, consideration of updates to the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta Conservancy General Grant Guidelines.
Good morning, board members. My name is Sarah Lesmeister, and I'm the Ecological and Community Programs Manager at the Delta Conservancy. Today, I will be presenting on 2 different agenda items for your consideration. The first agenda item, which starts on page 54 of your board packet, is consideration of updates to the Delta Conservancy's general grant guidelines. As a reminder, the general grant guidelines guide the Conservancy in granting funds not subject to more specific requirements outlined in the funding source. The 2 changes that we are proposing involve procedural changes to the invoicing process. The changes are made in track changes on 73 of the board packet, which is page 18 of the general grant guidelines. The first change would clarify that grantees must maintain, rather than submit during the invoicing process, documentation of 100% time accounting. The second change is that grantees must maintain, rather than submit during invoicing, documentation that payments have been made. By adopting these changes, the Delta Conservancy would be able to update our internal procedures to be consistent with other CNRA entities. Our grantees would still be required to have and maintain all the documentation, but they would just not submit them during the invoicing process. At any time, the Conservancy staff could request documentation to support the grantees' invoices. These changes would be mutually beneficial to the state and grantees. The preparation and review of the additional documentation takes considerable amount of staff time for both the grantee and Conservancy staff. If approved, Conservancy staff will finalize the changes to the general grant guidelines and post the updated guidelines to our webpage. Conservancy staff will then notify in writing existing grantees of the changes so they can, if desired, implement the changes to their invoicing processes. There's suggested motion language at the bottom of the agenda item for your consideration, but I'm happy to take any questions or comments before we proceed.
Okay, any questions or comments at this point?
I'll just comment, this is consistent with the Natural Resources Agency's, our internal programs on urban greening and museum grants. So I have no concerns.
Great, thank you for that input. Okay. Director Burgess.
Thank you. So being someone that was a recipient of some kinds of these grants when I was previously working in a nonprofit, there are different sizes of nonprofits, and some of them are more familiar with best practices and record keeping. It would be great if the state, with maybe the request for the Conservancy, could help create some sort of guideline of helping people understand what those expectations mean. And I'm really glad that they're doing this because it kind of helps save time and storage and all of that. But I do think that to set people up for success, it would be good to have some sort of guideline and kind of a model so that people understand what that expectation means. Thank you.
Thanks, Diane. And definitely, we internally have a couple of notes on that. One, during the proposal process, we require that grantees or applicants submit proof of that type of documentation. So what their payment processing system looks like, their time accounting, et cetera. So we are reviewing that to make sure that they have those abilities. For some of our nonprofits or who need technical, or small nonprofits, for example, who need more technical assistance, we work with them to demonstrate, to show what are some good examples of time accounting or, proof of payment examples, for example. And then we do, as soon as they are awarded the grant and before the grant is executed, we walk through our procedures and requirements for submitting invoices. So we do that with every single grantee now. We walk through it with them and go through that. We have examples that are tailored to their type of project so they can see kind of what is expected as they come through. And then finally, I know we've had some internal discussions more broadly about wanting to create handbooks, not only for staff internally, but also for our external partners, both applicants and grantees. So we're definitely on that pathway of wanting to provide this kind of grant assistance for our constituents.
Great
Our community members.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're managing, sometimes I was managing federal grants, state grants, local grants, and everybody has a different requirement. So when it's really clear what the expectation is, it saves time for those smaller staffed organizations and even the larger staffed organizations to be able to meet all of those requirements and to be the responsible grant recipients. So thank you. I appreciate your already doing the good stuff. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Allen.
Thank you. I would like to second the comment that was just made as somebody else who ran a nonprofit for 13 years. So the expectations were not always clear. And so samples and technical assistance is greatly appreciated and will help to make sure that they're doing it correctly. And I think it's great not to hand in all of the background paperwork along with it. But do we have a process or some sort of threshold? We say that we can do an audit or ask for them. Is there a procedure like, if they're in trouble, we look at it, or is there a random one? I'm just curious as a new to this organization.
Yeah, so currently we take everything and we review every single document that is submitted. So for example, some of the grants that me and my team oversee, we get hundreds of pages of timesheets, for example, in each invoice. And so you're counting up hours of staff time, and that's just not a good use of our time or the grantee's time to submit it. So what we typically looking for, we have it all rolled up and summarized, and we also look at what they submit during their report outs, meaning, you know, they provide a quarterly report out. And basically, if they say that an employee is spending 500 hours in a quarter working on, you know, I don't know, the quarterly invoice thing that should take an hour, you know, you would sit there and say, hey, this doesn't really make sense. Can you provide your documentation or backup about spending, you know, all of their time doing a task that should be pretty minimal? So we're kind of doing that fair and reasonable. Are the hours that they are requesting reasonable with what is part of their progress report? So that's our first one on here. And then at this point, we don't have any policy on like if a grantee is like misbehaving or having any issues. But like I mentioned in the staff report, if we have any concerns, the expectation is that the grantees would provide that to us within a reasonable time frame so we can evaluate their invoicing, make sure it's appropriate, fair, and reasonable.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Are there any public comments? Okay, then I'd be looking for a motion for the board to approve the updates to the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta Conservancy General Grant Guidelines for use in granting funds that are not subject to more specific requirements.
So moved.
So moved, Tom Patty.
Get ready to vote.
Okay,
Seconded.
all right. Director Mashburn is being very agreeable, Director Patty, so we'll credit you with the motion and him with the second. Roll call vote, please.
Thank you, sir.
Supervisor Mashburn,
Aye.
Board Member Winternitz,
Yes.
Supervisor Chair Hume,
Aye, either way.
I wish I was perfect.
Me too.
Supervisor Yes, I can stay with that one.
Yes,
Aye.
yes, aye.
Supervisor, so Ding and Patty are both on here, so I can only take one vote. Supervisor Ding.
I believe Patty was
Aye.
the motion.
Oh, motion. Gotcha. Thank you. Board Member Martin
Aye.
and Board Member Matsumoto.
Yes.
7 ayes, the motion carries.
All right, very good. That brings us on to item number 12, consideration to take action outside the Delta and Suisun Marsh Clean Vessel Act program proposal.
Made the motion. Great, so that's me again. So the second agenda item that I'm bringing for you today is consideration for staff action outside the Delta and Suisun Marsh in support of the Clean Vessel Act. I think with this agenda item starts on page 80 of the board packet. So Conservancy staff are interested in submitting a grant proposal with the Clean Vessel Act Education and Outreach Program, which is administered by the State Parks Division of Boating and Waterways. Typically, Conservancy staff do not present before the board a request to apply for funding. In this case, we are requesting to conduct work outside the Delta as part of our grant proposal, which is the intent of this agenda item. As we are all familiar with, the state is operating on a very lean budget now and into the foreseeable future. This funding opportunity will alleviate some of the Conservancy's budget constraints and provide financial support for Goal 4 of the Conservancy's strategic plan. Goal 4, which focuses on education and outreach about the Delta's ecological, cultural, and historic values, has not had a direct funding source in recent years. Progress on this objective has been made through our general operating budget or indirectly through other funding sources.
This grant award would provide direct funding to support these efforts. So the objectives of the Clean Vessel Act grant program are to provide education, outreach, and monitoring to inform the boating community about sewage-related issues, impacts, and available resources to prevent water pollution. The grant program focuses on 2 targeted regions, the San Francisco Bay Delta Estuary and the Southern California coastal counties. 2 grants will be awarded, one for each of the targeted regions. So for over 15 years, the San Francisco Estuary Partnership has led the Clean Vessel Program in the San Francisco Bay Delta Estuary. But recently they have expressed interest in sunsetting their involvement in the program due to shifts in their organizational.
It's intriguing. It's one intriguing to say this Lockford lady.
So as part of the monitoring component, the San Francisco Estuary Partnership has identified more than 80 pump out facilities at 65 locations in the Bay Delta Estuary. Nearly 90% of the pump out stations are located in the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta, Suisun Marsh, or San Francisco Estuary. Approximately 9 stations are located outside of the San Francisco Bay Delta region. To submit a competitive proposal, staff recommends that the board consider findings so staff may take action outside the legal delta and Suisun Marsh. If approved, staff anticipate less than 80 hours of staff time per year to conduct monitoring efforts in other Northern California coastal counties. Per statute, the Conservancy, to take action outside the legal delta, the Conservancy board must make findings that the project 1 implements the ecosystem goals of the Delta Plan. Number 2, meets all applicable state and federal permits. Number 3, staff have given notice to overlapping conservancies in the Delta Protection Commission. And number 4, that it will provide significant benefits to the Delta. So to address that, staff believes that the project meets the Delta Plan ecosystem goals by protecting, restoring, and enhancing the Delta ecosystem. The primary objective of this grant is to prevent water pollution and improve water quality by educating boaters about pump out stations. Nearly 90% of the pump out stations are located in or are hydrologically connected to the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta and Suisun Marsh. The project is consistent with all applicable state and federal permits, and staff have conducted and received support from the Delta Protection Commission and the Coastal Conservancy. If awarded, the Conservancy staff will work closely with the Coastal Conservancy on a mutually beneficial plan to monitor the stations with overlapping jurisdiction. And finally, the staff believes that this project, if approved and awarded, provides significant benefits to the Delta by protecting and enhancing the recreational values of the Delta and improving water quality to protect human health and environmental health. Many boaters travel to locations throughout California. So by educating boaters throughout the state, boaters who visit the Delta for recreation will be more informed about best practices for sewage management. Monitoring pump out and dump stations will ensure that they are operational and accessible, which will enhance recreational opportunities in the Delta and beyond. So with that, there's suggested motion language at the bottom. But before we proceed, I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
Great, thank you. Any questions or comments at this point? Any questions or comments online? No? Any public comments? All right, is there a motion to approve that the board approve findings to permit staff to conduct education, outreach, and monitoring of sites located outside of the legal Delta and Suisun Marsh for the Clean Vessel Act program?
I'll move.
Motion by Director Winternitz.
Second.
Second by Director Mashburn. Roll call vote, please. Should I walk you through it? We'll start with Supervisor Mashburn. Vice Chair.
Do I have to take over now?
Yes.
There we go. Supervisor Ding,
Yes.
thank you. Board Member Martin.
Aye.
Oh my gosh, Supervisor Burgess,
Yes, I.
and Board Member Matsumoto.
Yes.
Motion passes with 7 ayes. That is our last vote for the day.
Great, that concludes our action items. Now on to item number 13, Delta Conservancy 2024 Implementation Plan Status Update.
All right, well, good morning. I see that my notes are already outdated here. So Chair Hume and members of the board, it's always an honor to be here to talk about the really great work that our staff is doing. As you know, we have a really small team, but we are definitely accomplishing a ton with that small but mighty team that we have. So it's always nice to be able to be here, and it's an honor to get to really highlight the great work they've done this year. So to orient you, every January, staff puts together an implementation plan for the year based on our strategic plan. And then in July, we come back to you and let you know how what we have and haven't accomplished in that implementation plan, to let you know how we're proceeding towards the goals of reaching the strategic plan. So that's why I'm here today, is giving you that update to let you know how we're doing. And I want to start out and just kind of look high level. I'm not going to say anything today that you already haven't heard from somebody else on our staff, because we're all kind of dealing with the same challenges. But I am going to put it into context and context of what we've accomplished over the last 6 months. So to start really high level, the backdrop for everything we're doing this year is really the shift in budgets. So we really kind of hit an apex last year, and I think it was November when we approved all of the nature-based solutions funding. And then our forced money got budget solutions. So when that happened, we really kind of turned a corner there and are moving towards this push that we've had over the last 5 years or so to just get money out the door and get staff in to get money out the door. That's been really the push. Now it's kind of taking on a different form, knowing that we've got a little more space and we're not quite so focused on getting the money out the door. So I want to point out that staff still are managing existing grants, so they still have a lot on their plates to do. But there is a little bit more room, at least on program staff's plate, because they aren't taking in grants, they aren't working with new grantees anywhere near as much as they were. So we've been able to kind of shift focus a little bit. Organizationally, we've recognized this point in time that we're at, so this background of our budget, of our situation, where we are. And organizationally, we've really addressed that, and we're starting to pivot to this new reality by doing 3 things. All of them Campbell mentioned in the executive officer's report, so I will not go into detail, but I do want to flag them to put them in context. So first, as Campbell mentioned, we did begin to identify and apply for federal funding, as well as some local funding. So we put in over $30 million worth of grants, and we're continuing just to seek and put funding in for our high priority items with that grant funding. We are also on this Conservancy Light mission to try to figure out how, without all of this funding coming in, can we provide the most and best value for the Delta, and how can we really fully meet our mission in the best way that we can. So we began having conversations internally, talking with staff. We've met with almost all of the board members over the last few months to kind of get an idea of what your priorities are. We've also been talking to partners and just kind of getting out there to figure out how can we reorient and be less targeted on getting the funding out the door and more targeted on putting our staff work towards really high priority items that will benefit the Delta. The third thing that we've done is to really take that extra space. So I think with all of us, when a little bit of extra space opens up on our calendar, we know that we have a lot of options as to what fills in that space. So we've been being very thoughtful and mindful about how we fill in that space. And I guess summarizing it down to its essence, we're making sure that we're moving to deferred maintenance, and also making sure that we have the right priorities rather than kind of filling that space with things that maybe aren't the best and highest effort that we have. So as a result of all of that, given where we're at and kind of how we're pivoting since January, there are a number of things that we've picked up since January that were not part of the implementation plan that we talked about in January. And you'll see that in the implementation plan report. At the top of that, we listed out some of those items that we're moving to, so you can understand what we're kind of shifting our priorities to and see a highlight of that. I'm also proud to say, normally I come in here and I talk about some of the things that we haven't really done as well, or things that are kind of falling behind on our deadlines. And I would give us at least a C on absolutely everything that we're doing, and we're hitting those deadlines. So I get the good news of not coming in to talk about the things that we're not accomplishing, because we do have a little bit more space in our calendars. And I want to also just note that the team has done an amazing job of really recognizing where we're at, shifting and pivoting to this new reality. So I want to really say thank you to them for their efforts on this. Okay, so that's high level. And now I want to move into just highlighting a few of the specific efforts that we've covered over the last 6 months. Again, you've heard or will hear about a lot of them, so I will not go into detail. But I do want to talk about carbon subsidence. So we talked a little bit about that earlier in the MET presentation, or the presentation about nature-based solutions, in which we played the video from MET. We are still making sure that that's at the front and center of our work. We understand how important this carbon work is to the Delta, to the state, to climate change. We get how important it is. And we know we can't drop the ball. So we're staying focused on that. And we're doing that in a couple ways. One is that we're spreading awareness. So we're continuing to have conversations with people that can help us influence this or might have funding to be able to provide towards the carbon and subsidence issues. We are seeking funding opportunities. Our biggest proposal went in specifically to continue that work. And then we're also engaging with Met and TNC on that implementation of the $36 million that we gave out to try to make sure that it's on track, to stay engaged, to make sure that everything's moving smoothly. So we're keeping that front and center. DRIP, I want to turn to that. You're about to hear a long presentation. So I'll just say that the team has done a fantastic job of taking an issue that I don't think we realized was as informative as it is, and really helping us dig in on understanding water conservation in the Delta and kind of new territory and science that we didn't have before. So we're really grateful to them for the amazing work that they've done on that, but you'll hear from them in a second. And then also one of the things we've been able to do over the last 6 months is really expand our outreach and cleanups and public face. So Campbell mentioned a few of those. Folks have been going out to science presentations and being just more visible because we've had the space to do that. Also, when Hope came on, we hired her to do that public face and then instantly pulled her into doing a grant management job because we were understaffed. And now we're getting to really put her back to what she was hired for. And so it's been really great to see her kind of blossom, and you can see the work that's come out from us. We really have a bigger presence than we did 6 months ago. So that's been great. Also, we've been able to engage with the Delta Plan Interagency Implementation Committee, Restoration Subcommittee, and the Interagency Invasive Species Coordination Team, which has been a really important thing, given how much is happening in those committees. We've been able to have a big presence in that, so we're really grateful for that. And then the last thing I'll note is that we finished the fish-friendly farming program. We've been talking about that for years, and it's great to now have those practices on the ground, implemented, and working towards the benefit of the Delta. So those are the great things. We have a number of staff members that you don't hear from every time we're here, and that are doing an incredible amount of work that's really critical, but it's also not the kind of things that we throw out in the reports, and I want to acknowledge how much they've done this year. So one of the things with this crazy budget year that we've been through is that we've been getting budget drills and asks. Amanda's laughing because she said many of them out. Budget drills and information on this and extra reports and just things to make sure that we're on track for the budget, but also for CNRA. And our team has just been tremendous about getting on top of those things, figuring out what they are, asking questions, and getting all of that out. And that's in addition to all of the things that you've already seen that they're managing internally. So our administrative staff has done just a fantastic job. We're also we're getting close to being able to launch the Raptor, the Resources Agency Project Tracker, which we've been working on. But all of our staff to help do that has spent a tremendous amount of time taking either double databases or shifting from one database to the other, which, as we all know, takes all of us a long time to kind of figure out. So they've been doing that as well. And then finally, something that people don't ever bring up, it is a tremendous amount of work, is that our staff has been moving over to from one cloud storage to a different one, which also means then going through and cleaning out all of those files. And I can tell you, I don't like cleaning out my closets, but these are files that some of them haven't been touched in 12 years. So they're doing a really tremendous job of figuring out how to make us way more efficient by kind of going through and doing that. So that's the bulk of what I wanted to bring up. I will bring up the one thing that continues to kind of be a struggle for us is the Delta Sign program. That we're still working on that, but I do want to highlight that is not a fault of us or our partners. It's just the reality of dealing with Caltrans and trying to get right-of-ways put up. It's been a bigger process than I think any of us thought from the beginning. So I also want to thank the board members. You've been incredibly gracious with your time and meeting with us and giving us direction and helping us kind of get through this Conservancy Light phase. We had many conversations with you. We got a lot of really good ideas. we would absolutely like to keep the conversations going. So as time progresses, if you have ideas, if there's thoughts, please reach out to Campbell and I. We'd love to have more conversations to make sure that we're on track for where we should be going to be, again, at the best interest of the Delta and be able to serve it at the highest capacity. So with that, I'm open to any questions, and we do not have an action item.
Great, thank you. Any questions or comments?
I'll comment kudos to the administrative staff. Natural Resources is over 27 different departments in the state, and this is not one of my problem children.
Well, and C's get degrees. Okay.
We'll take it.
I did have a question. In your call out here, one of the mentions was Delta Week. When is that scheduled for? Is it always the last week of September? Sweet, awesome, thank you. Any comments online? No? Okay, that was informational only, so we'll move on to item 14, the 2023 Delta Drought Response Pilot Program Report and Analysis. Rachel's show.
That's our. Yeah, we're trying to start a band. We need to learn to play some instruments first. Details. All right. Good morning, board members. My name is Rachel Lane, and I'm an environmental scientist and was previously an analyst for the Delta Drought Response Pilot Program for Drip here at the Delta Conservancy. I'm joined today by Dr. Rachel Wigginton, Senior Environmental Scientist at the Delta Conservancy. We will be co-presenting Agenda Item 14, the Delta Drought Response Pilot Program Report and Analysis. The staff report in these slides can be found starting on page 91 of the board packet. The full 2023 DRIP report is now posted on the Delta Conservancy's website. During this presentation, Rachel and I will be sharing an overview of the 2023 DRIP analysis, the key takeaways from that analysis, some conclusions and recommendations for the future, and information about how you can learn more if you're interested. Both years of DRIP were a collaborative effort. The planning, selection, and oversight committees for DRIP included representatives from the California Department of Water Resources, the Delta Conservancy, the Office of the Delta Water Master, the Nature Conservancy, the California Department of Food and Agriculture, the University of California, Merced and Davis campuses, UC Cooperative Extension, the State Water Resources Control Board, OpenET, and various farm bureaus. And last, but certainly not least, the Delta growers who participated in this program were a key part of DRIP. Starting in summer 2022, the 2023 DRIP Planning Committee met and agreed the second year of the pilot program would be a continuation of the 2022 program, but with additional goals and an updated implementation approach. Specifically, a reverse auction and bid selection process was implemented in 2023 to increase the amount of acreage that could be enrolled with the available funds. A selection committee met to evaluate 109 qualified bids, and ultimately 61 projects were executed with 33 unique grantees. Another change for 2023 was the inclusion of incentivized bird benefits practices in collaboration with the Nature Conservancy. In the interest of time, we'll not be presenting those results today, but you can read about the bird benefits outcomes in Appendix C of the 2023 final report. The objectives of the 2023 DRIP was to evaluate if changing specific field management practices could result in water savings, protect Delta water quality by providing additional incremental in-stream flow benefits to reduce salinity effects on water quality, mitigate potential drought impacts on fish and migratory birds, and promote soil health. To achieve these objectives, the Delta Conservancy established a grant program to incentivize growers to carry out water conservation and beneficial bird habitat practices in the legal delta. During the 2023 water year, there were approximately 18,000 acres enrolled in both water conservation and beneficial bird habitat practices, with project sites spread throughout the legal delta. Those 18,000 acres are shown in red on this map. Practices were carried out starting early in calendar year 2023 and continued through the end of September 2023. Today's presentation is focused on the 2023 program. More information about the first year of the program is available on the Conservancy's website. Across the fields enrolled in the program, we collected several types of data that were used in the Oversight Committee's analysis. During the grant application and grant agreement phase, surveys were used to define the boundaries of each project and find out information about what would have happened on the site if the grant were not awarded. Progress reports, grant summaries, and site visits were used to verify practices and to discuss any emerging concerns with grantees. We used evapotranspiration, or ET, to estimate water used and to calculate water saved during the program using several calculation methods. Evapotranspiration is the process by which water is transferred from the land to the atmosphere through evaporation from the Earth's surface and transpiration from plants. Our data source was OpenET, which is a free satellite-based open source tool.
So now we're going to get into some of the results of that analysis. This map shows the estimated water savings in acre feet per acre for each project field, and land elevation is shown as shading in the background. Darker shading indicates land that is further below sea level, and projects with the highest savings are shown in dark green. Projects with no or minimal savings are shown in white. I'd like you to notice the projects that have a net increase in water use compared to the baseline are shown in pink. On our site visit today, we will be visiting the project site in the northwestern corner of the map, which is above sea level and actually had the highest saving of any project enrolled in the 2023 program, nearly 2 acre feet per acre of estimated water savings. Though it's unlikely that this type of water savings would be achievable in all areas. And across all projects, we estimated that the 2023 drip saved up to 1,890 acre feet of water. About half of the enrolled projects had some estimated water savings, but overall estimated water savings were low. Generally, project fields at higher elevation showed greater water savings potential, and deeply subsided islands tend to have less estimated water savings. However, the total savings were not substantial, and it was unlikely that the amount of water saved during the 2023 program had an impact on in-channel water quality. So why might field elevation matter in our estimated water savings? So all fields in the Delta and elsewhere may receive water from irrigation and precipitation, but some of those lower elevation fields may be more likely to access additional moisture from seepage underneath levees and also shallow groundwater. And this is especially true when they're growing deeply rooted crops or weeds. Thus, plants on lower elevation fields may have more access to water, grow more vigorously, and potentially result in lower estimated water savings. This map shows the elevation gradient through, the previous map showed the elevation gradient throughout the whole delta. And this map shows the project fields with mean elevation of each field indicated by color. To better understand the relationship between estimated water savings and elevation, we performed a regression analysis. The plot you're seeing now displays water savings versus elevation. Here, the vertical axis shows estimated water savings in acre feet per acre, and the horizontal axis shows mean elevation in feet. And each point that you see represents an individual project site. So all projects that are below the red line had no estimated water savings. Projects that are above the red line had some estimated water savings. The blue line indicates 0 feet of elevation, so sea level, which means that everything to the left of the blue line is below sea level and everything to the right of the blue line is above sea level. Interestingly, though, only about 25% of our project fields were above sea level, these fields did account for a disproportionate amount of the total water savings than fields that were below sea level. While the results of our regression analysis weren't statistically significant, we can see that elevation likely helps explain some of the variation in the estimated water savings among the fields, but it didn't explain all of the variability that we saw.
Another way to account for the differences in water saved among fields was to analyze them based on the field's water conservation practice type. which are displayed by color on this map and table. The most common practice type undertaken by grantees was shift crop type. Farmers carrying out this practice moved from a more water-intensive crop, such as corn, tomatoes, or alfalfa, to a crop that was thought to use less water, such as safflower or small grains. The next two most common practices were deficit irrigation, which included projects that did not apply a portion of their business as usual irrigation amount, and forego cash crop, which included projects that grew no crop on the project site during the summer months. Water savings estimates varied substantially, both within and among practice types. You'll see a graphic displaying these data on this slide. The vertical axis is estimated water savings in acre feet per acre. The horizontal axis shows the different water conservation practice types. The data are shown in a box and whisker plot. These types of plots help to visualize the distribution of a variable. The black dots represent the annual estimated water savings for each individual field. The horizontal line inside the box represents the median, which is the value that half of the data points fall above and half fall below. Notice the spread of savings estimates within each practice type and how much overlap there is among the different practice types. There's a lot of variability among the fields, but this way of categorizing the fields doesn't fully help us to explain that variability.
Crop type may be another way to help explain some of that variation among the fields. The 6 most common crop types, which are shown in this pie chart, were triticale, corn, wheat, safflower, not growing a crop on the field, and pasture. This plot shows estimated water savings versus elevation only for the fields growing one of those 6 most common crop types. So given the high variability of elevation and crop type within our sample, there's no real clear pattern about which crop type and elevation combinations would save the most water, but we do have a few interesting patterns that we want to speculate about and show you all today. So first, these red circles show that shifting away from growing alfalfa to growing another crop or performing another practice consistently saved water in our sample site. So here we see that all of the fields that shifted away from growing alfalfa are above that red 0 line, indicating some water savings. These blue circles show deficit irrigated pasture, which saved water across varying elevations. Even at low elevations, deficit irrigating pasture showed some water savings. And interestingly, the project with the highest water savings, which we're going to visit today, was a deficit irrigated pasture field at a higher field elevation. In contrast, deficit irrigating corn, which is shown in these orange circles, was highly variable in terms of how much water was saved, with some fields showing increased water usage compared to the baseline. However, as you'll notice, there were no deficit irrigated corn fields enrolled in the program in 2023 that were above sea level. So we really can't say anything with our sample about water savings for deficit irrigating corn at higher elevations, or even whether deficit irrigating corn at those higher elevations would be a financially viable practice to implement. Just crop type and elevation together can help explain some of the variation in the results that we're seeing, but we would really need a much higher sample size and a more even spread across that elevation gradient with more significant consistency in how folks were implementing those practices to fully understand how these factors would impact water savings potential. Other possible drivers of water savings may have been things like vegetation management practices, field soil type, local flooding, and then even overall water year conditions. Speaking of water year conditions, this slide does show the 13 drip fields that were enrolled in both 2022 and 2023, which allows us to compare consumptive use between those 2 water years. However, I just want to point out that this sample size is really too small to draw any definitive conclusions about the relationship between water year and potential water savings or use. We did find that average consumptive use in 2022, which is shown in the red circles on this graphic, was lower than in 2023, which is shown in the blue triangles. And you can see in, for example, field A, where that pattern holds true. However, across the fields, you'll notice that the difference between the 2 years really varies. And there's even a few fields like field F, where consumptive use was higher in 2022 than in 2023. And there were several differences between those 2 water years, as we all personally experienced. Air temperatures were lower in 2023, and total precipitation was much higher in water year 2023. And due to these 2 factors, there was a large amount of local flooding on some of our project fields in 2023 that was weather related, that we didn't experience in 2022. In fact, 50% of our fields experienced some level of weather-related flooding during the project implementation period. So all 3 of these factors, local flooding, precipitation, and air temperature, likely led to higher soil moisture conditions in 2023, which would allow plants to grow more vigorously and potentially increase evapotranspiration on the fields.
So in conclusion, future water conservation programs and regulations will need to balance actions that produce the most water savings with consideration for climate and biodiversity objectives. Droughts are multi-year and variable, and programs that address drought need to be flexible enough to respond accordingly. Crop planting often takes place before water year conditions are apparent. Future water conservation programs could work closely with growers to build in flexibility for postponement or rapid deployment of water conservation practices, depending on water year conditions. Overall water savings from the 2023 drip were lower than anticipated, particularly at lower elevations. Future programs could consider focusing on fields at higher elevations to better understand their potential for higher water savings. And finally, open source remote sensing satellite estimates of evapotranspiration, like those from OpenET, make it possible to cost-effectively measure water use, index overall water use, and study the factors that drive evapotranspiration changes. Last month, the Delta Conservancy convened a forum attended by more than 50 individuals representing Delta growers, Delta water agencies, state workers, and interested members of the public. Attendees heard presentations from the Delta Conservancy and our project partners, and feedback was gathered during 2 interactive sessions. The key takeaways that we presented today are displayed on this slide for your reference. If you'd like to learn more, the 2022 and 2023 DRIP reports are both available on the Delta Conservancy's website. The data used in the analyses will be anonymized and made available, most likely on the CNRA Open Data website, which will then be linked on our website. Thank you so much for your time and attention. We'd be happy to take any comments or questions that you may have.
Well, good job. I mean, it's kind of taking a lot of variables and factors into account here. And I think that 2024 will be interesting as it kind of slips and juxtaposes to 22 and 23 in order to get a bigger picture. Any other comments or questions? Director Burgess?
Yeah, I think this is great. And I think we have to do this kind of work in order to really understand how to do the things that we're trying to accomplish. I think what keeps coming back in my mind while watching this, though, is what are the economic benefits to our farmers? Are they saving money, because of less water usage? Are they switching crops, increasing their revenue because it's a better crop? I didn't ever realize till recently that property values are influenced by the value of the crops that are produced. And so what are those economic benefits or challenges that are related to switching crops? And I know that the goal of this is to figure out ways to, do all the things that we're trying to do, but ultimately we can't force people to do certain things sometimes. So we have to be able to show the value and the benefits of doing that. So that was kind of just my observation while watching this.
So I did have one question.
Yeah, Director Mesh.
Is there anybody, we obviously aren't, but is there anybody looking at the impacts to recharge for our aquifers as a result of this conservation of water through changing crops? Because I know farming, as we move through, like, on Hammond, we're putting in drip. We used to flood irrigate on all of our nut crops. Now we don't. Well, that was a direct impact on recharge for aquifers. And we're having subsidence and we're having all these issues as a result of the reduction in those aquifers. What impacts are these changes having on that? And is anybody studying that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know, Rachel, if you know whether COSINA's data collection covers that or not.
I don't think it covers aquifer recharge, but I'm fairly certain that DWR, partners at DWR and the overall the groundwater program are looking at that. And there was a lot of incentive payments, I think, to flood fields during the last big water year. And so I think that was getting measured related to that. I don't know how many of those sites were in the legal delta though. But yeah, we are not measuring that as part of this program, but I think it's a really interesting question. And I think there's a lot of interesting areas for future research around the interplay of like recharging aquifers, shallow groundwater, water in the channel, and how all those different pools are connected and how applied irrigation impacts those pools.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if I could respond to Diane's comment about the economic benefits, I just want to say that is definitely something that we were thinking about during this analysis, and we had considered putting it on some of the surveys that Rachel Lane had sent out, and it just was one of those things kind of hit the cutting room floor. But I think it's extremely important to think about, and the way that we structured the program with the reverse auction and the incentive payments, it was sort of expected that this deficit irrigation and potentially shifting crop type would have some sort of economic benefit or economic impact to the growers. And so they were able to then bid the amount that they felt would like cover that potential economic shortcoming that they would have from participating in the program. So I think to your overall comment about how we can get broader implementation of these things, I think we would need to start to gather the information about what the actual economic impacts were. So that if folks were to enter into these practices without an incentive payment, they could really have open eyes about what the impacts would be.
Thank you.
Great. Any other comments or questions?
Quick comment.
Yes, sir.
So one of the objectives was increased flow to provide for improved delta water quality. So I take it the results of the program didn't really show that was a fine benefit or a major benefit, a significant benefit.
Yeah, I think so. In this study, it's very difficult to directly measure that. And so we were using ET as sort of a proxy for that. And so I think with that, a little bit under 2,000 acre feet total savings, that would have minimal effect on water quality is our assumption.
I just recognize our partners, Jay Ziegler with the Delta Water Master's Office and all the work and effort they put in this as well.
Hey. Nice to be with so many familiar faces, friends and partners this morning. Thank you all for participation in the effort. I really want to just extend a big thank you to the Delta Conservancy for really being the backbone of all of this work over the last couple of years and engagement with the farming community across the Delta and local government and the academic community. And so I think I also want to, couple of things. This was a 2-year program, pilot program provided with funding from the Department of Water Resources. And I want to recognize Director Nemeth and her team for really an extraordinary commitment to help us better understand consumptive use in the Delta, because that's what we're really digging into here. And I also, I kind of want to go back to the 2015-16 end of Drought 1, as we now call it, in the 21st century. And my predecessor, Michael George, was very instrumental in circling the Delta, meeting with farmers, talking with stakeholders across the spectrum. How do we get a voluntary conservation program driven and aimed at the Delta? And overwhelmingly, the response to that was, well, our water rights are sacrosanct. So let's put that issue aside. and in that context, can you build an incentive-based program that would give us a reason to come to the table and reduce consumptive use of water, try a portfolio from fallowing, crop substitution, to deficit irrigation in fields. And so that portfolio all kind of rode from a, history 6 years prior, that Michael really drove in getting buy-in around the Delta. And so there's a long foundation of that. We are continuing, the Office of the Delta Water Master, in the Delta Measurement Experimental Consortium. And I want to acknowledge the work of the Office of the Delta Water Master team that worked actively with the Conservancy staff and others in the process, Lindsay Kameyer, John Collins, and then my new team that's kind of picking up a lot of the work here going forward. So Alex Burke and Will Anderson behind me. And so I think it's really important to think of the continuum of work that we're doing across the Delta to better understand consumptive use in real time. And I think if you look at the data, it tells us something about moving from a very dry year to a wet year. Well, we don't know what it's like moving from a wet year to a dry year. And so, how does the Delta behave organically as a system in that context? And so what we really did learn is it's extraordinarily difficult to conserve water in the legal Delta, and especially at subsided elevations, and more than a third of Delta farming is done at substantially subsided elevations. So as we work to the future, we have built a reporting program on OpenET. So we're to have this data set coming in using OpenET helps us develop a more robust resource to compare different water year conditions, different water use practices at different farming places throughout the Delta, different soil conditions, different elevations, different crop types. And so we're really excited to kind of take this work going forward. The farm site that you're going to visit today is actually a part of the program that will continue for 3 years through water year 26. So UC Davis has set up a 6-station network through the Delta using eddy covariant flux towers to monitor on a telemetry ground scale actual consumptive use, and give us more refined data over a multi-year period in understanding consumptive use there. So we're super excited about that work. And then complementary work to really just dig in, understand real-time consumptive use in the Delta, which affects water quality throughout the Delta, and the kinds of objectives that we should be managing to throughout the Delta, and especially as the state board is in consideration of updating the water quality control plan. So just really a big thanks to Conservancy staff and all the partners, UC Davis, Cooperative Extension Program, the ongoing work in looking at different methodologies to measure consumptive use in the Delta. And again, thinking of the multiple outcomes that we're trying to achieve throughout the Delta. So Office of the Delta Water Master is excited to stay involved in this work. We encourage all of you to continue involvement through this Delta Measurement Experimental Consortium, and we'll be sending information out to you all as we continue this work. So thank you all, and look for you. It's a great learning exercise, a great laboratory to bring farmers together with scientists and the state agencies looking at consumptive use in the Delta. So just really excited about it, and big thanks to all.
Thank you. As the potential for community enhancement grants, consider new grants and or amendments to existing grants. So not a lot on the agenda for October at this point, but certainly open to other ideas that staff or board members would like to see covered. I'm sure that will fill out as it always does between now and October. So look forward to seeing you.
Okay, anything else from board members? Any items you'd like to see? How about online? No? Okay. Any public comment? I assume this is for items not on the agenda. All right, I think this brings us to Mr. Mashburn's favorite part. We're adjourned.